Welcome to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my co-host, John Barker. And John, this is the last legislative update we'll shoot for the season, because then now the work's been done.
The work has been done.
And I know this has been one tough road to hoe here because of, the mask and everything else that was going on. And my goodness, you guys have been busy.
Right, and you remember when we started, we were separated in the chamber. We used a gallery. Both galleries had people sitting 6 feet apart, which was rough on the freshmen because, normally we have buttons to push and voting. We had to go on our laptops, had to vote on the laptops. Mm-hmm. We had some problems voting on occasion on our laptops, so it just took longer. The debates were slower just because members in the gallery, if they were going to debate or ask a question on the bill, they had to do it from the balcony. They didn't come down to the chamber. And it was just a different world. So, but we did, we went back in for veto session. We're all on the floor again. Everyone that has been made eligible for vaccination, whether they chose to take it or not. But we did go back on the floor, and when veto started on the Monday, we anticipated it may go until the 11th. Fortunately, we got out on officially it's the Friday the 7th, but it was 2 o'clock in the morning. But because we had not adjourned, we were on the same legislative day. So officially we ended on the 7th, although it was Saturday morning, and we had a busy time. I mean, the last week was just, it's hurry up and wait, because we were running bills between the Senate and the House. So if we had a conference committee that came to the House, and then we would vote on it, then it had to go back to the Senate, and if the Senate changed it or voted it down, it had to come back to the House, go back to conference committee, work on the bill, and then present it to us again. We had to do that a few times on some of the bills. But the exciting part, the governor had vetoed more of our bills than any recent governor, I think back since Finney. And that was her claim to fame. Well, this legislature overrode more of her vetoes than any legislature in history. So we spent one whole day just taking up bills that she had vetoed, and we did override those vetoes, every one that we took up in the House. Now the Senate didn't take up some, but for example, we finished in 85 days. We took up the override, which was the tax relief, and that was a bill that we had sent to the governor last couple of years, and every time she would veto it. But what it does, it increases standard deductions for Kansas, your standardized deductions. It took care of that. It gave some business options to itemize under state taxes, whether or not they itemized on the federal taxes or not. And that was because of the federal tax cut a few years ago under President Trump. It also required online retailers that are located out of state, and if they're selling merchandise in the state, then they have to remit to the state the sales taxes, which helps the brick and mortar businesses.
Sure.
Because it was it was not fair competition. So they now will need to remit those taxes. Also, what I thought was really important about it was that victims of identity theft owing Kansas income tax based upon unemployment compensation, because we had so much fraud, that they are immune from that. They have an immunity. They can't be taxed for that fraudulent income unemployment taxes.
Right.
So that was good. Did a number of other things. Of course, I carried the bill that to override the governor on the bill on the Second Amendment, allowing 18-year-olds to carry concealed weapons. It initially started as a reciprocal bill, recognizing other states, and then they in turn recognize ours. So we were able to override that. We had the 84 votes, which is minimum, and 2/3 of the House voted, and then the Senate also voted. So that will become law without the governor's signature. So it was a busy day. But it was a little hurry up wait, because before they would bring a bill on the floor, we have to caucus. So we have to go back to our offices or on the floor, turn on our computers, and who's ever going to carry the bill has to present the bill or any changes in the bill, and that has to be done prior to voting on the bill on the floor.
Okay. Now I know on that session, John, that because you had talked about it before, and what is that called? That special session you go back for?
Veto session.
Veto session, and that was after, of course, the legislature had adjourned,
Right.
and then the governor did her work, and then
Exactly.
you guys go back and come in and do that.
Right.
We're going to cut away, take a break. You're watching Legislative Updates. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my co-host, John Barker, who's the representative from the 70th District. And, John, this is like your 30th year of being out there on it, but it's not quite that bad
No,
yet,
not that. Seems like it.
Yeah, I know. Earlier in the year, you said, "Man, oh man, this has been the worst yet," because it's just so difficult with everything else that was going on around you.
Yeah, and a lot of it had to do with because of COVID last year. We had a very short session, so we had a lot of work that we needed to do last year that we had to pick up this year, plus additional work. Yeah. And so it was busy, and as I mentioned earlier, the separation that we had. There was, normally we have some camaraderie, on both sides. We associate with the Democrats associate with us, but when you're spread out, and you actually really can't, when you have masks on, and some folks up there had 3 masks on, but so it was difficult to hear people when they spoke. So we made an exception that when you're speaking at the well, you can take your mask off.
Take it
so
off.
That was good.
Well, John, I was thinking about on that veto session. When you talk about that and you come back to it, and the legislature has already taken action, passed a bill, then the governor vetoed it, and so now it comes back in. Is there, in that process, does the governor have staff who comes in and says, look, don't override the veto because, and then they try to give their side of the story?
Sure.
Is that what happens?
Yeah, they contact you either online, by email, or text, and say, please don't. And I get it from constituents. Most of the people who wanted me to sustain the governor's veto was not in my district. A lot of from Johnson County. But then you have to go up and make a formal motion, and it's usually the chair of the committee that it came out of. The bill came out of originally. So I had to go up and make the motion on the Second Amendment, and it's a motion like, notwithstanding the governor's veto, I move that the House override the veto of governor on House Bill such and such, such and such. And then I have to stand for questions. Well, stand for questions. If any questions are, then I go back and possibly explain or at least answer the questions. And then I move my motion, and then I would go back to my chair, and then we would vote.
And the vote margin has to be? 2/3. 2/3 to override the veto.
So you need 84 votes in the House, because the House is 125. Most of our vetoes were at 84. We have 86 Republicans in the House, but some chose not to vote for some of the vetoes. They voted for some, didn't vote for others. But every one we took up, none of them failed. So that was good. I mean, one of the bills that we overrode the veto was strengthening our election security, which was House Bill 2183. It criminalized impersonating an election official, requires the Secretary of State to report the total number of registered voters in each county each month. It criminalized changing vote totals by manipulating computer hardware, because there's some allegations of that. Unless conducted by an election official, prohibited election officials from accepting monetary contributions. And lastly, the bill prohibits a candidate for office from delivering advance voting ballots on behalf of voters unless they are a member of the immediate family. You always have some, what we used to call it ballot harvesting. A candidate would go out to a nursing home and hand out the ballots, and then he'd come back a day later and pick them all up and then go turn them in. Can't do that. And so we put that into statute. But other than that, the House did override a number of line item vetoes that were in the appropriations bill. The governor, it's the only bill that she can line item veto, and she did a number of those. The House took them up, and we actually overrode every one of her vetoes on the appropriations bill. The Senate didn't take those up. So those, because she vetoed them, are not law now. But we went ahead and took it up. One of the last ones, which was protecting the income level for programs of all-inclusive care for the elderly, which is what we call the PACE program. It increased. They can keep more money and still get their benefits, because a lot of them live independently.
Right.
They have to pay their rent, their water bill. So we wanted to let them have more of their money. So we did that. The governor vetoed it. We overrode it with 104 to 20. A lot of
Democrats, pretty clear.
Democrats came on board on that one.
Yeah.
The Democrats didn't even like that veto, because it was just giving people that are receiving some services to have a little bit more of if they're getting Social Security or whatever, they would be able to keep more of that, because presently they have to turn it over to the state if they're getting services. So I was glad to see that a lot of the Democrats, but of course this was the last veto. I think we'd overrode it 8 times before, and they were getting tired of that, so they thought they'd just join us on that one, so they did. That was good. And we also did House Bill 2158, has to do with protecting children and foster care. Good bill. Does a number of things. It has Adrian's Law, which is a bill that came out of my committee on child abuse. Added exemptions to a number of things. Requires 6 months period to elapse after a juvenile adjudication before DCF secretary could license a family foster home. Child's in a home, juvenile offender, they can't necessarily be the foster parents.
Okay.
But the important one, and we'll talk about it maybe the next segment, would be the educational funding. And this one, the governor actually came out and supported it. She didn't like it, all of it, but she was going to support it. And that was the education bill, House Bill 2134. I thought the committee that handled that did a great job. And we did, a lot to touch on it, passed 107 to 9. So we had a lot of Democrat support. They didn't like part of it, but it fully funded school finance laws for the current year, next year, and the following year. Increased the number of students who could be served by the tax credit for low-income student scholarships program. We added that, and that's the part they didn't like. But we were able to do that. Right now, qualified students will now be those on free and reduced lunches. Before it was just free lunches. But you get in a lot of the poorer areas, those kids that go to school, the parents put them in a private school because they have better schools, and they can take the income tax credit. So that's good. And it did a number of other things. It added some additional money to the Department of Education for the COVID Relief Fund, out of the COVID Relief Fund, recommended $500 in employee compensation for federal COVID relief funds. It improved student achievement with budgeting requirements, extended high-density at-risk weighting, which those school districts will get a little bit more money.
Okay, let's cut away and take a break. You're watching Legislative Updates. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my co-host, John Barker, representative from the 70th District, and we're doing the last session of the Legislative Updates for the year, because that process is the meetings in Topeka. Those are over for now. And John, one of the things that we were talking about when we were on break is something that I know you brought up very early in these sessions, because the governor's office was in charge of that unemployment funding that went on. And I remember that when you came in before, you said, man, the governor has lost about 70% of that money. And so there was some action taken in regards to that here at the end as well.
We did, and there's still a post audit to be completed on that, because that's a pretty monumental task to go through all of that. But the initial report that the post audit put out said that anywhere from 60 to 70% of that money could be.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, talking about a lot of money. Is fraud. So the post audit is completing that. They'll probably get it done this summer. But we put in there for people that had their identity stolen and claims were made against them, whether they were unemployed or not, but they didn't get any money, that they can't be charged, or the state cannot go after them for paying.
Assess the money to them when they didn't even get it.
When they didn't get it, exactly. And so we did that, which was a good bill. It was in our appropriations bill, and then, of course, then we went back in. The only two things we need to do every year in the legislature, of course, is pass an appropriation bill, and then after the appropriation bill, after we get to consensus estimates, do an omnibus bill, which is all-inclusive. Worked on that pretty hard. It was Senate Bill 59. It increased funding support to nursing home facilities, continuing the rate increase that was placed back during the last year COVID pandemic. We addressed federal maintenance of efforts requirements for higher education by adding $53 million into that. We replaced a $7.2 million in lost revenue from the judicial branch because case filings were down last year because of COVID. So they've lost about $7.2 million. So we put that back in the budget for them because now they'll probably have a big increase in filings because COVID is almost over with. Provided funding for salary supports for judges and non-judicial employees, anywhere from 5 to 12.5%. And they've not had a raise in years, and we're ranked 50th in the nation in judges' salaries. So the Chief Justice sent me a very, very nice handwritten note that I got Monday or Tuesday from her. But
you're talking about it from the 8th District?
No, the Chief Justice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Justice Lucard.
Oh, yeah.
I'd had a meeting with her prior to the start of the veto session. She knows I've always tried to be a supporter of the judicial branch, and so we were able to get that through. We provided to support salary increase for judges, increased the Sparks Committee, changing membership from all gubernatorial appointments to 3 appointments by the governor, 2 by the Speaker of the House, 2 by the Senate President, added language. So before, under the Sparks, which was that committee the governor created to disperse federal COVID-19 money, now it's also has legislative members, which the Speaker will appoint, and the House Senate President. It authorized $3 million in state general funds for costs associated with the new 988, which is a suicide hotline that the federal government's created. So we're going to have to go to that, and so we had to put some money in for that. We added funds to raise the protected income, and that's the PACE, which I talked about earlier, for which had been vetoed by the governor in House Bill 2007. So when she vetoed it in the appropriations bill, and that's the one that had like 104 votes, it went to the Senate. The Senate never took the veto up, so we put it in the omnibus bill. So those folks will be able to keep more of their income and still receive services. So that passed the House 98 to 21.
Big
so
margin.
Big margin. Had a lot of Democrats on board, and the Senate passed it 26 to 21, a little closer. But we also put in the House Bill 2187, and we talked about that maybe a month or so ago. It was a bill that you could, if you're for home buying purposes, you can place some money in an account like a 529, if you're familiar with the saving plans for colleges.
Okay.
For a number of years. I think it's $2,500 a year, and not pay any taxes on that. And then when you get a sufficient amount, you can use it as a down payment on a house. What
happens if you put the money in and then you don't use it?
To buy a house?
Yeah.
Then you pay taxes on it.
You pay taxes on it.
Right. Yeah, you're not going to go. We're not that bad. We do a lot of mistakes up there.
I figured there was a way.
We passed a number of other bills. It's been very successful with regulating the sale and distribution of Creighton. It's a product that's sold at some of the gas stations and whatever. It was legalized 4 or 5 years ago. It's a natural element, but we had no regulations on it, on the purity or anything, so we did pass that. That came out of my committee. We also passed a bill containing a related mistreatment of a dependent adult or older person. We increased the penalties there, where you may very likely go to jail or prison for that. Taking care of folks like us, Doug.
Yeah, that's good.
The elderly.
That's good.
We had some alcohol bills. Oh, another bill that came out of committee that I really liked, it was 2224. The bill expands the definition of infectious diseases. Initially, years ago, it was for AIDS. We took all the AIDS language out and just said, it could be any disease, like COVID-19 or anything else. So if you're a first responder, EMT, law enforcement officer, fireman, and you get exposed to that, then you can have a free test paid for by whatever jurisdiction that you work for. But if it's a criminal complaint, like a law enforcement officer, and they prosecute in court, then if the defendant's found guilty, he has to reimburse that entity for the cost of that.
Oh, I see. Let me cut away, John.
Mm-hmm.
Let's cut away. We'll take our final break, and we'll be right back watching Legislative Updates. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, co-host John Barker of 70th District. We're just finishing up, and John, it's been an interesting year and a good year, and thank you so much for the work you put into this, because most people don't have any concept of how much time this takes and the effort, and I know you'll be busy in the off season, so thank you, John.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks for watching. See you next year.